Hey, this is Professor Homa. Welcome to EX11. This is part 7. This should be the last one, and we're just going to do the responsive design part of this, where we basically are going to put in 2 breakpoints so this actually shows up nice in a mobile device other than when you make it smaller. So that'll involve just working with our CSS, and we're going to jump to our CSS, and I already have some of this done for you. And we have a media query. Here's the media query. At media queries at media screen and max width 850. We're going to use 850 as a breakpoint because we kind of measured it. I basically measured it in Firefox. And again, if you go to Firefox and use your tools and you use your responsive design view tools, that's where I kind of did this, and I resized it, and I said, oh, and I looked up here and I said, at about 850, this is where I wanted the breakpoint to be. So right where it starts to cover up links, it was about 850. That's where I did the breakpoint. So my first breakpoint is going to be 850, and it's just going to make everything 100%. And it shouldn't affect our layout too much. It's just going to take these links and break them to the bottom. And that's all that's really going to, and it's going to get rid of the shadows and some other things and some of the floats. So it's not going to do a whole lot initially. So there's not a whole lot to do here to make it actually responsive. But what you have to do is copy, and I did this for you, but you have to copy and paste some of the elements, that only the ones that will change. And if there's elements that change, you have to make sure that you change them, or they'll stay whatever the default is. So that's why it says only use elements and properties that will change. So in the HTML, the background image, you know what? I'm not going to need it if it's going to be 100%, so I'm just going to hit none. And background repeat, I'm just going to hit none for that. The padding, I don't know if I'm going to necessarily change the padding, but I don't think I need a padding for body anymore, so I'm going to put 0 on that because I do have padding in the container. Now the width, we're going to use the percent. We're going to use a percent in here, so you could just think 100%. So let me just put that in for now, although I'm going to have to change that. Also the padding. Now the padding, we had 36 pixels, but we're not going to use pixels, we're going to use percent. So how do you convert that? Well, if you take 36 divided by 930, you'll get a percent of, because remember it was 36 pixels and 930 was the total with everything. It would come out to like basically 4%. Keep in mind that that's 4% on each side, which would add up to 8%. That means we have to make this 92. So this should be doubled when you're figuring out what the width is, or else you're going to have too much space in it. Okay, because I should show you what happens if I don't do that. I'll leave it at 100 right now, and you'll see what happens. But the margin is for the container. I think we're going to just put it to 0 because we don't need anything necessarily below it. The border, we'll take the border off. We'll put it just to 0. That should overwrite everything. And the box shadow, I'm just going to put none because I don't really need a box shadow. That's not really going to help us on a small screen. Okay, the pic strip. Okay, this is that section with the pictures in. What I'm going to do with this is just put 100%. It says adjust width to 100%. So I'm going to keep that at 100%. That means that section will get smaller. It'll be as wide as the window. But I'm going to use this overflow hidden to cover it up. So that means whatever overflows of the picture is going to get cut off. We're not going to set it to scale. That's why for max height, I'm going to put 300 pixels in here. So I'm going to keep that section the same height. So the width will be 100%. The width will get smaller, but I'm going to keep the height of the pictures 100% because I want that logo to show. If you remember in here, when I get smaller, see, I want the width of these pictures to stay the same. I mean, I want the height to stay the same, but I basically want the width to cut off. So the height's going to stay 300 pixels, but the width's going to be 100%. If I didn't change that, it would scroll. It would still cover it up, but I would scroll because there'd be all this picture image here. But right now the picture's getting hidden, and that's actually what I want because I wanted this logo showing up. So anyway, that should fix that. Now the article part, the width in here, I'm just going to put 100%. You might say, why not make that 92? Well, I don't have a padding on that. And I'm going to put float of none. So I'll remove the float so it doesn't float to the left anymore. And that should stack that first, and then the right nav should go after it because it's after it in the HTML flow. If you look at the HTML, right nav comes after, wherever right nav is. Right nav comes after that part. So that should stack below it when it goes to one column. Okay, in my right nav part, I want to remove positioning here. So where I had that stuff with the 4M and the 5M, I'm just going to put zeros in here. And then you can see when I do this, I'll move this over if this is working. See what happens, those bullets get way over there. The bullets always kind of go over the margin, so I'm going to adjust that. I'm just going to do a margin left of like 1em. So it moves over a little bit, so the bullets don't, the bullets move over a little bit when it gets past 850. There, 1em looks nice. It kind of lines up pretty well over there. Okay, so you can see here when it gets to 850, it bumps. There's the break point. It bumps and it puts this stuff down here, and it takes it. Some of the stuff you don't even notice, and that's kind of the way it should be. The call today, I think I forgot a asterisk here. All right, call today. This is already done for you. Footer address, so we're going to just basically put percentages. I'll put padding of 4%, and I'll put width of 92%. And the reason I'm doing that is because I don't have any padding from container, because remember the footer is outside of the container. So that's why I'm doing that. And again, this call today just puts a little space above and below. That's already done for you. The foot, we're going to remove the float here so those things don't stack anymore. So they'll just be normal. And same thing with this one. I'll remove the float here and just put none, so they stack normally. And now that's looking okay. So I'm also going to. I also threw a media query in here for 400, which just adjusts some of the size here. It just makes the size 1em because it seems like some of those links look too small. We're also going to make those things at the top nav, we'll make those display as block again. So they actually kind of, if they get real small, and again I'm talking about this one here, we're going to make them, instead of being these lines here with the spaces get all odd, I'm going to make them so they go block after it gets to 400. So on a real small size, so on an iPhone size or a phone size, we'll do that. So I'll put that to block. I'll remove all the padding from them, and I'll remove all the border right. I'll just put 0 in there, and I don't want any borders here or anything, so I could remove all of that, I believe, because we're not going to need any space between them if they're all in one line. So all that stuff could just be 0, just to take, because if it's there, it's going to stay. So I make sure anything that's changing I have to rewrite. And also the font size, I'll make 1em here. So that should be it. Okay, again, we did a media query for 850, and then we did one to just stack some things. So let me just take a look at this again as we make it smaller. Remember, this is how it started. Everything's centered, and then once it gets to 850, it bumps this stuff down here, and they basically, it's not going to be floated anymore, so we take away the float. Up here, these are going to start breaking on lines over here. You can see they're breaking on lines, but everything down here is basically stacked. And that size still looks a little small, but that's okay for now. And basically, as we get down to like almost phone size, we still have a little issue with margin over here, which I'll check and see what that is. Okay, I forgot I even did this part in here. Remember I was talking about this? I put this in on purpose because we have a little extra space there, and one of the things I mentioned was up here with container. If we have padding 4%, that means there's 4% on either side. That's 8% of padding, and we have a width of 100%. That makes it too big. So we have to make that 92% up here, and I'll save that, and that should fix that problem, that scrolling problem. And now you can see we even get a little kind of margin here, which is actually nice because I want it to cover up. I want that kind of padding on the side here, so it's covering. The padding is kind of it's hiding the edge. This box actually ends here. That's why that is, and that's okay. I don't want that. I want it to look good, basically on a phone device, and I want to keep this image large. So that's the way that's going to be. So once it gets past 400, it basically puts that on a block. And I did put some non-breaking spaces to keep some of these things together, so it didn't put PH on another line from the number. And that's basically responsive. It's not perfect, but if you had to look it up in a phone, it looks a lot better than if it was getting cut off completely, or if you had to do a lot of pinching to see it. So I think that's it. So once you're done, you're going to save both of these, save your EX11, save your index, and then you're just going to copy that whole folder back up to CyberDuck and replace your other one, and it should update. And then remember, you have to update your home page before the end of the semester so I could have links to all of your exercises that you've done, and I'll give more instructions to that up on Blackboard. So you should be done with this.